What's up, dudes, lady dudes? Welcome back to Just Nuts, guys. Today, we're going over the different types of Yu-Gi-Oh decks out there. So this is not like archetypes. These are the types of kind of focusing on the different strategical approaches each deck in Yu-Gi-Oh can take. Because there's honestly not a ton. When you really simplify it down overall, they do things differently, but the same general goal may be in mind. So there's really not that many. There's only 6 real different types of decks. So I'm going to be covering them here to hopefully make more sense. And maybe this can help you kind of make more sense of different decks and kind of simplify them to a point where you're like, oh, like the general strategy is way simpler now to me to understand. So let's hop right in with the first deck here, the most aggressive deck, obviously. They're called aggro decks here. These are going to be your decks that always will opt to go second most of the time. They always are trying to OTK your opponent. You're just trying to kill in one fell turn, one fell swoop. And then it's all based on like devaluing your opponent's cards. So the whole goal of this deck is to like you summon something that can like these decks use a lot of board wipes. You may play like your Raigekis, your Dark Hole to devalue what your opponent's cards did for them. So if turn 1 your opponent set up a big old board but it didn't have the protection from maybe destruction by card effect or battle, you could go in with just a Raigeki and wipe the whole board. They put all those resources into those monsters and you wiped them all in with one card. You used one resource to out multiple resources your opponent put in. This deck usually doesn't care too much about defense because it's all about just killing that quick. That if you don't kill, you're just hoping your opponent won't kill you back and maybe you can get the kill on the next turn. So defense is not usually the biggest strength for this card. It's usually the biggest weakness, honestly. This deck usually gives like the slower decks, control type decks, a lot of trouble because they can just overwhelm them. Decks that can set up decent boards, this deck can struggle. These kinds of deck can struggle with just because they have trouble getting over them. Some of the best examples of these kind of deck, by the way, are like dinosaurs. You almost always opt to go second with dinosaurs. You're trying to get that extra draw, that extra resource to help you turbo into conductor on that first turn. And then with conductor, you wipe the whole board, as well as like mermails. They're just a super like spam the board, summon a bunch of monsters. You want to go second, and then you just run your opponent over in one turn. So these are probably 2 of the most like relevant currently like examples of going this of the aggro type decks. The duels are usually pretty short. Longer duels, longer drawn out duels are going to give this deck a lot of trouble because they don't have the ability to just grind and grind and grind. So there you go, the most aggressive deck, aggro. The next deck here is control-based deck. This is personally one of my favorite kinds of decks. I like the slower decks, the decks that have grindier, duels that last a little longer, and it's like a resource game. You really have to, be good with your resources to play these kinds of decks here. Sky Strikers are a good example here. Control decks use kind of like stun. They usually have multiple ways to disrupt your opponent. You see Sky Strikers, they play a lot of hand traps. They have Widow Anchors that are usually, like at least one, maybe multiple Widow Anchors set for your opponent on their turn. So there's your disruption. They usually have a lower ceiling offensively. The deck is not about exploding and killing your opponent quickly. It's usually a longer drawn out duels. And obviously, keep in mind, guys, when I'm going through these, there are going to be exceptions. There are going to be decks that pretty much fit into a category, but they may be slightly different. There's nothing like, only very few decks are going to fit perfectly. These are just some pretty good examples, I thought, that make pretty much sense. These decks deal with like big threats with like minimal investment. You're not trying to use a ton of resources to out bigger threats. So like with Sky Strikers, you have your Widow Anchors. If you have your 3 spells in the grave, your Widow Anchor is going to steal monsters. You can just steal your opponent's monster and link it away. If you're trying to deal with it pretty nice and easily. Altergeists are another control stunny deck. You're just like, your opponent tries to do something, stun. Opponent tries to do something else, stun. Can't do anything. Because Altergeists are not super powerful, but if you can just stun your opponent enough, then they're just not going to be able to do anything. And your weak monsters are going to be enough to get the job done. Like we said with aggro decks, aggro decks are like these decks' worst matchups, because if you can't overly stun them to the point where they can't do anything, they're just gonna run you over like so easily. Like against like this deck and like Sky Strikers, if your opponent summons Conductor and you are out of like stun cards, you probably just lose. Like you probably just lose right there. And you just want to stop combos before they even get started with this kind of deck. So there you go. Control-based decks, really cool. These are some of my favorite types of decks. I don't like these two specifically, but control decks in general, I do enjoy. Then the next deck we have combo-based decks. So these are like going to be like your Goki and your FTK style decks, where pretty much the entire strategy is just do your combo. You have like a couple of set combos where you know your combo, you know how to do it, and the duel is pretty much going to be reliant on whether or not you can do that combo. If you get the combo off, you probably just win the duel right there, because usually what happens is you set up a board that's not going to be breakable at that point. And if you don't get your combo off, you probably lose because your board's not going to be unbreakable. Right there. So that's pretty much what comes down to combos. You usually play a lot of cards that just push your combo. You're not worried about super stunning your opponent. You're not worried about what they're doing. You're more worried about getting your combo off, because if you do, you win. We see with Gokis, if you set up your extra link with like a Trigate or a Gumblar, you probably just win. And with FTKs, obviously if you do your combo, you win. It's an FTK. You're going to kill your opponent in turn one before they can do anything. So very boomer bust. They usually have a very extensive extra deck, just because the main deck is all full of cards that help you combo, and the extra deck is your board cards. So like your main deck is helping you combo to get to your extra deck, and your extra deck is just filled with your monsters that are going to be your ending board most of the time. And there even might be some extenders in the extra deck as well. They make very strong boards, and most of the combos are usually 2 cards, because 3 cards are just unreliable. You're banking on too much. You're asking for like too much. It's not going to be consistent enough if you need the 3 cards. So a lot of these decks are built off of 2 card combos. We saw with Gokis, all you needed was like, for the longest time, everybody knew that you had combo. You could get a Goki on the board with any other warrior, and you had combo. You could extra link. So there you go. There are your combo decks. Pretty basic there. Then we have ramp decks. I actually, when I was doing research for these different types of decks, I didn't actually know about this type. And when I saw this, I was like, what is a ramp deck? And I guess it makes basic sense. It's a ramp, right? You start down here and you work your way up. So these decks are very slow to start, but as the duel goes on, they build and build and build and build, and from mid to late game, they're pretty much unstoppable. But they're fairly, vulnerable during those earlier stages of the game. So the best examples I had for this are like Dark Magician and Weather Painters, because Weather Painters always banish themselves and come back. So like every turn, you'd like never lose your Weather Painters. You just get 1 more every turn, and then eventually you have 5 of them in circulation. You can summon the Link Monster, which negates anything, and you're just off to the races. So if you can get to that point, you probably just win. If you can't, if your opponent doesn't let you, build everything up, then you're going to have a lot of trouble. Same kind of thing with Dark Magician. They can spam some beat sticks to the board earlier. They do have ways to do that, but for the most part, it's all about getting like your how is it called? That stone card, Eternal something. The trap card that specials on the Dark Magician from hand or grave once per turn for free, as well as the Dark Magical Circle. It says like every time you summon a Dark Magician, you can banish. So like you have ways of like, as you keep going, taking your opponent's resources as you keep building, and that's the main thing, is you just keep special summoning once per turn with that Eternal Soul card. So that's what you do there. Let's see. There's usually a lot of continuous cards. So like with both these, those are perfect examples. All of the weather canvases are continuous spells, and you need them to stay up on your field to keep getting those resources. True Draco, I don't know if it's necessarily if I'd call True Draco a ramp type deck. No, I wouldn't call it a ramp deck. But Dark Magician as well. We just said Eternal Soul, that continuous trap that keeps getting you Dark Magicians. That card's very important for the strategy. And yeah, so just really slow yeah, just keep in mind they're slow in the mid game, but you just keep building and building and building, and by the end you're unstoppable. Then we move to our fifth strategy. Here we have mid-range strategies. These might be these and control type decks are like probably my two favorite decks. They're the slower stuff. I do like Weather Painters a lot, which are a ramp deck, but they're a ramp deck while at the same time can be like a control deck because you may put like tech cards. And keep that in mind too, guys, is that these strategies, the strategies for the archetypes may fit into one of these, but you also try and make up with that with tech cards and other cards like generic cards. You put hand traps in for decks that don't have the built-in disruption. Like dinosaurs don't have the built-in disruption going second really, so you may put hand traps in to slow your opponent down. For when you go second, you can just crash on them. Those aggro decks can just crash really fast and hard. And like same thing with stun, like a controlled deck. If your opponent doesn't have, or if you don't have a deck, if your deck doesn't give you that much stun, you may just play trap cards, floodgates, stuff that's going to help you control the duel otherwise, and they're just generic. They don't actually fit into the archetype specifically. So keep that in mind as well, is that certain, like, whereas Weather Painter is technically a ramp deck, it can be control because you will probably play some other cards in there that are just kind of generic. But anyway, we move to mid-range. These are the kind of decks that can kind of do it all. They do everything fairly well, but they don't do anything very well, right? So these are one of those decks that, like, they can be offensive, they can be defensive, they can stun a little bit, they can search a little bit and play the resource game. They don't have a incredibly high ceiling, but the floor is very nice. Like the floor, you're always, like, the deck's very consistent, so you're always gonna have like your solid boards, but you're not gonna have any of these crazy unbreakable boards that you're gonna see in like combo decks, really, or late game ramp decks. They're usually like pretty simple strategies, but they're like relatively powerful, like ABCs. The strategy's pretty basic. You set up your Buster Dragon, and then you have like your Buster Dragon that can get you kind of out itself to get all your resources back, and you can just play that game over and over again, keep removing your opponent's stuff. Very obvious what the goal is there. So a very cool deck. I like that it has no inherent weakness, except for that, like, if you're forced to play a deck at its own game, you're probably not going to win because you don't do anything exceptionally well. Whereas if you play a ramp deck and it gets to the late game, you'll lose out there. If you play an aggro deck and you try to aggro them back and you try to beat them at their own game, you're probably going to lose because they're just going to outdo you, and just with any deck. But you don't have any of those inherent obvious weaknesses. So you can get wins that way, where a lot of these decks need to exploit other decks' weaknesses, whereas this deck tends to not have super blaring obvious weaknesses. And then we move to the last strategy here, which are hybrids. This is not anything specific, whereas all the ones before were like specific. Hybrid is just any combination of two, kind of, that you can see. And like one of the best explanations I could see is like Teller Knights. Teller Knights are like your combination of a control deck combined with a ramp deck, right? So this is a deck where you play your Fiendish Chains, you play the I can't even remember the trap card that negates like anything as long as you control a Teller Knight. You tribute the Teller Knight and then you draw a card. So like you have your stun capabilities, you have your control aspects, but at the same time the deck just builds and builds and builds because you have cards like Call of the Haunted. You have Call of the Haunted and Fiendish Chain mainly is because they're the continuous traps where once you summon Trevere will add all those cards back to your hand, so you can just set them again. You summon Altair, you special from grave, you blah blah blah, and every turn, if you can just loop Altair every turn with like Call of the Haunteds and stuff, you're just gonna keep specialing and keep specialing and keep specialing, and then your board's just gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger. You're gonna get more and more stun cards until eventually you outdo your opponent. So it does have the early game capabilities to stun, while at the same time the ability to make it to late game where you just amass insane advantage and can't be stopped. So this is the best example I could find here. I didn't look super hard. There are probably other examples as well, but there you go. These decks usually try to like compensate for the main weakness with the other aspect, right? So like you're a control deck, whereas like longer duels you may not, you could fizzle out. So you have that ramp aspect to help you to hold on longer, or vice versa. If you were kind of like an obvious ramp strategy, you're weaker in the early game, whereas you're very strong in late. So as long as you can hold off, and that's where the stun, the control aspect comes in. Control decks are better in the early game because you have your negation and your fiendish chain right off the bat, probably with some hand traps as well. You have ways to hold your opponent off until you're able to amass your advantage and set up everything for your ramp win. Other than that, that's pretty much all I have to say, guys. I mean, it's pretty simple, but hopefully this can help you simplify decks when you're looking at them and you're kind of look at them and you're just like, what kind of deck is this? Like, how do I make sense of this deck? Because when you see a new deck come out, or when you get back into the meta and you see a new deck, you're like, I don't even understand like what kind of deck this is. Like, I understand some of the things it does, but like what's the overall strategy? Hopefully this video can help you kind of like simplify that and be like, oh, it's like, if you really break it down, it's just a ramp deck or a hybrid ramp and control deck like Tellarknights or something, you know what I mean? One of them. Hopefully this will just make a little more sense that way. Hopefully it does. Guys, I'm going to get out of here. I've been rambling too long. I tried to keep this video around 15. I did all right. 16, 17 minutes. I'll take it. But guys, if you enjoyed this video, or if this video was helpful to you, please subscribe for more Yu-Gi-Oh videos from me, more Yu-Gi-Oh content in general from me. And yeah, more deck profiles coming soon. I have some started to line up. I just want to make sure the lists are exactly the way I want them before I put them out for you guys. I don't want to rush it and give you subpar kind of meh lists that are like super generic and stuff. So I just want to make sure they're good. And yeah, I'm going to get the hell out of here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And have a good, sexy day, night, whenever you watch this. Sorry.